Well, good day and welcome to SOP, Save Our Planet. My name is Gary Willing. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. Now, I always do a couple things when I start these videos. The first and most important suggestion that I can suggest to anyone after listening to this video is to take some time out of your day, do a little research, look into this, and see if it's true for you. If you go to the Share International site, the link is at the very top of the description portion. You get the best background information on that website than you can anywhere else. And you don't have to put in your information. You don't have to give them your email address. The information is free. So I hate it when I go to these websites and they're wanting more information about me before I can get any information from them. This information is totally free. So it will only take you a little bit of time to do a little research, and you get the best information there than you can anywhere else. So hopefully you'll check it out. The second thing I'm hoping that you do is to join the discussion. Post a comment. Let me know what you think. If you have a question you want to ask me, post your question in the comment section, then I'll try to answer it in the next video. All right. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but is it Nyambura? Nyambura? Am I pronouncing that right? If I'm not, I mean you no disrespect. But what did you ask me? You said, what in your view are we called to do at this moment to support the work of the Masters of Wisdom? Well, what a wonderful question. And if you don't mind, can I share something with you real quick? I thought about this when I read your question. Okay, so I started putting up videos about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom in February of 2019. So almost 7 years. And when I started, I had no idea what the response was going to be from the public. I had no idea that somebody would even go and listen to any of my videos. I had no idea that people would start to comment and then ask questions, of course. I had no idea. So I put up a couple videos and kind of left it at that. And then I started thinking about doing another video. Then I put up another video and so forth and so forth. And then a few weeks after I started, I got my first comment. And I was so excited. I opened it up and I read it. And it was very thoughtful, very concise, very, very concise, because it was just a few words. And also very memorable. It said, "This is bullshit." And I'm sure that the person who took the time out of their day to comment on my channel and write that was at least hoping that it would be discouraging enough that I would probably stop and never put up another video. But it did the exact opposite. It encouraged me to do another video because I said to myself, and I remember thinking this, I was like, somebody out there actually listened to my video. They didn't care what I had to say, but that doesn't matter. There are others that are going to want to hear what this is. And by me putting these videos up, it's obviously reaching some people. So I started putting up more videos, and then more and more people started to comment. And I'm sure in the beginning it was a lot like the first comment. And then I got this question, and it was like, whoa, I was not expecting anybody to ask a question. I did not intend to put these videos up to field questions and try to answer questions about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. Never in a million years did I ever think that would be the case. And since then, I have had a lot of questions and a lot of comments, and they varied, and they're, the people behind the questions and the comments have obviously varied and so forth, and what they think about me has varied for sure. And it's also been wonderful to see the progression of someone from, let's say, commenting initially and being very much against what I have to say, to then asking a few questions here or there, and then really not really knowing what to make of it, and then even admitting, well, I kind of get it. I don't necessarily believe it as much as you, but I kind of get it. And to see that progression has been wonderful. But this particular question, what can you do to help, at this moment, to help aid Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom? What can you do? I have been waiting for nearly 7 years, patiently, I can assure you, for someone to ask me this question. Because it's probably the single question that you should be asking yourself if you are starting to believe this information. And then, of course, the next step would be to actually do something about it. So, since you asked this question, I'll say it like this. The single thing that you can do at this moment to help aid Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom is to do what Benjamin Creme suggests that you do, that his master has suggested many times in articles, and that even Maitreya has suggested that you do. is to make known the presence of Maitreya, to let people know a little bit or as much as you can, as much as you remember about why they're coming back and what they mean for humanity that they're coming back. And to make it known at whatever level you want to make it known as. So if you believe it at 100%, make it known at 100%. But if you only believe it at 3 or 4%, then only make it known at 3 or 4%. And in so doing, you'll help humanity out far better than you can possibly imagine. You'll probably be spreading hope to people that perhaps are kind of down on the hopes, thing because they're aware of what's going on in the world. But you don't know what somebody's going to do with it or take with it, either now or in the future based on what you say. And you have to put aside your fear of being ridiculed. You have to put aside your fear of being shut down in the conversation, but you just have to kind of take that step and do it. And by doing it, you'll see that it might eventually change your life in a way. To be honest, because that's what I've noticed with myself. When I first started talking about this, I was really nervous to talk about it and bring it up. But once I started talking about it, it started to become easier. And what I've noticed is from this channel and from people in my life is those people who initially did not really like what I had to say about it have kind of, changed and softened over the years and are a little bit more open to the idea of what I'm saying, at least. So, that's what I would say would be the first thing. But there are other ways to help prepare the way for the masters. And, some things that I can think of would be to join groups that are actually, doing work for the environment or to bring about peace or to bring about justice or something like that. And those groups, do great work. And those people that take time out of their day and sometimes even risk their own livelihood and their own future to step into the group and march for, peace or for justice or for the environment or against a regime or whatever country you're in. And it's looking like it's going to be like that in the United States, either now or very soon, right? Where you'll be taking matters into your own hands and taking your livelihood into your own hands by standing up against the Trump administration, right? But those people who are marching for peace and marching for justice and marching for the environment, nobody's talking about sharing. And if you read Ben Master's articles, you'll see that that is the most important thing that we need to do. It will change everything. It will be the foundation for all the changes, is the principle of sharing. So that question, how do you aid the masters of wisdom, is very similar to the question that a lot of people who have no idea about who and what the masters are, that question is, how do I help the world? They don't know what to do. And they have this question, how do I help the world? In your case, you're asking the question, how do I help aid the masters of wisdom? It's the same thing. You know what I mean? And that question, I think, is the beginning of it all, to be honest. Ben's master painted this picture with this article he wrote entitled Unity, or the Need for Unity, or something like that, where he talked about it as like a wise gardener who's starting to garden and tend to his garden, this concept of unity. And to tend to it and to nurture it and to not neglect it and to not overwater and not underwater. You have to kind of know what to do and then watch it grow in that way. And this question that you asked, how to help or aid the masters of wisdom, or if you've asked the question, how do I help the world, is the same thing, right? You have to tend to it like a gardener would do. And if you were a gardener and you planted that seed in early spring right after it's warm enough for it not to freeze, right? Then you start to water it, you start to fertilize it, you tend to your garden, right? And then you keep tending to your garden and nothing's happening, or appears that nothing's happening, until one morning when you go out there, there's a little green poking through the dirt, right? And if you planted a lot of seeds, there's a lot of little green, throughout your garden, right? And you're like, ooh, all right, now we're on to something, right? And you don't know what kind of vegetable it is. It could be corn, you just don't know what it is based on that little bit of green, but there's a little bit of green poking through the dirt. Well, that question, how to help the world or how to help aid the masters of wisdom, is the same question. It's like that's the little green poking through the dirt. It's the start. And every one of these masters including Maitreya themselves, at some point when they were just a man or woman in incarnation, with all the fears that we have, all the pains and the afflictions that we have, all the insecurities that we have and so forth, all the prejudices that we have and everything, at one point in their life asked themselves that very question. And in the same way that we all do, didn't really know what to do with that question. But that question came out of nowhere, right? Well, how do I help the world? A lot of people don't ever ask themselves that question. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so when you get to the point where you ask yourself that question, that means that your soul is starting to nudge you to do something with that. That question comes from the soul. It doesn't come from the personality in incarnation, the person in incarnation. It comes from the soul, and we are the souls in incarnation. The soul comes into incarnation to help build right human relationships. That's what its purpose is. So whether that's individually, whether that's within a family usually, or a group of, in an area or a nation or the world, just depends on the person. We are all here to help build right human relationships. Most people, when they think of their soul's purpose, they think of becoming wealthy and becoming well-known and very famous and those kind of things. That's what their soul's purpose is. Well, that's all human ego. The soul in and of itself has none of that in its nature. It only knows that its purpose is to build right human relationships. That's it. And if you look throughout the world, that is what's solely lacking. That's the reason why our environment is in the sorry state that it is. That's the reason why we're living in a world of plenty where people are literally starving to death. That's why we have war. That's why we have terrorism. That's why we have drug abuse. That's why we have sex trafficking. That's why we have all these tensions between nations and so forth, is all because there is little to no right human relationships in the world. Really. So to build right human relationships, what do you do? Well, it's, like I said, starts with that one question. And then you have to find the best way to do that. Well, globally, the only way to bring about right human relationships amongst nations is for nations to learn to share. The groups of people who are fighting and marching for justice and marching for peace and marching for the environment and so forth, none of them are talking about the most important part of what they want, to get what they want, which is justice, peace, or the environment being saved, right? And that is sharing. Even in the environment will not be saved until nations learn to share resources with one another, because nations have to learn how to cooperate with one another. So if you find yourself in those groups, bring up, and it can happen organically, right? You could bring up the need for the principle of sharing. If you're part of a group that's marching for peace, talk to them about the principle of sharing and how important it is and how that will bring about justice. And if you have to quote Maitreya, without sharing, there can be no justice. Without justice, there can be no peace. Without peace, there can be no future. Then do it. Talk to them about it. That's the truth of it. And in so doing, help aid the masters of wisdom. But their purpose for coming back is to create right human relationships in the world, amongst nations, like I said, and even individually amongst all of us. So that is where I would say is the next line of questioning is, how do we do that? Well, like I said, I think the best and easiest way is to just let people know who and what Maitreya is, what his purpose is, some of his priorities if you can. Study more about it if you need to, and we all need to learn more about this. I found by just reading Ben's Master's articles how impactful it is, how it's giving me such a different perspective on the principle of sharing, on some of the problems of the world, on unity that I didn't have before I started to read it. It really is, they're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And you've even said yourself at the beginning of this, thank you for putting up these excerpts, which are just a paragraph or so of his articles. So why not go and read the whole article for yourself, right? If you haven't done it already. The other thing is these masters will tell you is that service is not only doing, it's also being. So how do you become a being of service? Well, the only way to do that is to truly know yourself as the self. That's the only way. Maitreya says the easiest way to realize yourself as the self is to practice three things: honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. So if you were, let's say, talking to people about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, and you're very attached to the result, well, the result of what you're going to be doing and what happens in the result of you talking about it, you can help thwart that by being attached, or you know what I mean? Or if you're talking to somebody about the environment and you're not having honesty of mind because you're thinking one thing, saying something else, and doing something entirely different, well, you're really not helping as much as you could. So if you're practicing honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment, and you can do this all throughout your day, really, as much or little as you want, you can start to realize yourself as a self. And there was one thing that Jim Carrey said, because Jim Carrey is actually doing this too, that I've noticed. He doesn't use those terms, honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment, but I've been watching some interviews with him, and he's very introspective. And one of the things that he said, he was actually, in his own way, talking about realizing the self. And he said that he can't always hold on to it, and that he'll fall back into his old habits and his old ways of thinking. But he realizes that when at that moment that he had it and then he lost it, he knows where he needs to go, right? It was such a wonderful way of putting it. But it's true, so you will start to realize yourself as the self as you practiced honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. It might only be a few seconds or a minute, and then you'll go back to being attached or go back to being, anxious or whatever, and then you have to pull yourself out of it and detach yourself from that again through honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. And it's a process, it's a practice. That's why you said practice it. Practice it over and over and over again till you become perfect at it, like these masters. Service is the same way. Practice service. Try it, do it, fail, do it again, try it, do it, fail, right? And keep doing it. But if you do it with detachment, if you do it with honesty of mind, if you do it with sincerity of spirit, well, the outcome is much deeper and much more longer lasting and much more permanent than it would be if you're not practicing those things. Does that make sense? So the other thing that I would say to look at, to inculcate, to nurture within yourself is faith. And I'm not talking about a religious faith in a dogma or ideology. I'm talking about real faith. Faith in yourself as the soul, knowing that you're the self, through honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment, of course, but also having faith in others in that way. And when you have faith in yourself and in others, you can't have fear in what you say to them. Because even if they respond the way that you wouldn't want them to respond, one, you're detached from the result, but the other thing is you have to have faith that they are going to realize the truth in what you're saying in their own time. So therefore, it doesn't matter how they react or if they do nothing with it. Do you see what I'm saying? So at this moment in time, because you did say at this time, I would say the best way to help and aid the masters is to let people know who and what Maitreya is, what his purpose is, the priorities of the teacher. Well, then the next phase would be, in his emergence, would be he's not known who he is, but he's starting to become very well known as a figure. And you might even start to suspect that that's Maitreya. You might even have a really good guess that's him. Well, the worst thing that you can do, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but the worst thing to do is to tell others that is Maitreya. You actually will be harming them in that way. The best thing to do is to let them come to the truth within themselves. Have faith in them that they will realize it too. And trust that their soul will lead them to the truth of what Maitreya is saying. But one thing you could do, especially when it's going to get more divided actually in the world, because he'll be speaking very simply. He'll be speaking with love. He'll be speaking these wonderfully wise and logical words in a very relaxed way. So he's not going to be panicked and saying that if you don't do this right now, you're all going to die. He doesn't do it like that. He's still very relaxed. He has faith in humanity, that humanity is going to realize this, even though it's taking us much longer than he probably has hoped. But even though he's saying these words, we're going to be hearing it differently. So a large portion of the world will be very glad that he's here, wanting to hear what he has to say, becoming perhaps galvanized by what he's saying into action in some way to help save the world. The other half are going to not have that experience at all, even though they're listening to the exact same words. They're going to be very afraid of what he's saying. They're going to accuse him of all sorts of things. They'll denigrate him as much as possible. And then those people who are listening to that group are going to be very afraid of him. Well, one way you could help them is not to say that that's Maitreya, not to say that that's the world teacher or that's the Christ come back, but perhaps say it like this. What harm is it to hear him out a little bit further? Just hear him out. Hear what he has to say. What harm is there in listening to him? That would be better serving of the person in that regard than to tell them that that is Maitreya. If somebody is galvanized to action by what he's saying, tell them about the principle of sharing if they aren't talking about it. Like, listen to what he says about the principle of sharing and how important that is, or something to that effect. But to tell them that to tell that group of people that he is Maitreya, that it won't help them either. It will harm them too. So it's better to let people realize the truth in what he's saying for themselves. And it's also better to let people realize the truth in who and what Maitreya is for themselves and not get in the way of that. And then once Maitreya is out known for who he is after the Day of Declaration, well, then you don't have to let anybody know who he is. So then you're going to have to start the process over again. What do I do? Well, it's going to be a little bit easier because Maitreya is going to be shining light on what we need to do first and second and third, and then we can all join in the groups that are doing what we think we need to do first and what's better suited for us personally and so forth. And all the priorities of Maitreya, from the principle of sharing, the establishment of peace, the beautification of the cities, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, the free interchanges of people and so forth, the reintroduction to the mysteries, the education in the hearts of minds, the removal of guilt and so forth in the hearts and minds of people, all these priorities that Maitreya has, we will find what best suits us, and then hopefully it will behoove us to do something and help restore the world. And Maitreya is not going to set to right the world's problems on his own. He is going to inspire us to solve the problems. So then, like I said, once he's out known for who he is, well, then we have to find another form of service that we can do, whether it's educating people on this, because people are going to want to know more about this information, a lot more people than want to know about it now. People are going to want to know how to bring about peace, how to help the environment, how to, beautify our cities. And these masters will be teaching us how to do all those things. So then you'll find which one is right for you in that way. Thank you very much for the question. I love you guys very much. And remember this. Remember what Maitreya said to me. You'll see him on TV real soon, and we'll change the world together. We are going to change the world together, all of us, with Maitreya, with these masters of wisdom, every single one of us. I love you guys. Thank you very much. Talk to you later. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.